I want to welcome everybody to Nacho Zoom TV. I'm going to have Bob Septak, founder of United Dental Brokers of America, someone I work with daily, talk with us about what do we see with practice values. There's a ton of speculation right now. There's a lot of JFOing, just find out. But we need to prepare ourselves, aware ourselves, have the uncomfortable conversations like Mark Casa says, so we can grow, so we can know what we're thinking about as dentistry moves from closed. I have a little sign here. Dentistry is not going to move from closed to open. It's going to move from closed to less closed to open. And what does that mean there? So Bob, thanks for being on with us. Share with our audience what you do, how you help dentists, and your journey through the practice transitions world.
Well, we help both buyers and sellers, obviously, not just one side or the other, but primarily we're working with the sellers on helping them sell their practice. And with what's going on now, as you know, there's a lot of nothing going on because practices aren't open. Nobody's looking to buy right now. The banks aren't lending the money.
And we have deals that are on pause. I mean, I have deals that we're going to go through. And right now, I've talked about before coronavirus crisis, pause coronavirus crisis, and after coronavirus crisis. And we have deals that are just paused right now because for the first time, I think in history, dental offices are closed, dentistry shut down. So it's a new phenomenon that we've never dealt with.
Well, I actually talked to one banker today, and what he was saying, what they're hearing today is they want to see a couple months of activity that is similar to, say, January and February this year, right? So what I said was, well, let's say it's similar, but what if the mix is different, right? So let's say you were 25% hygiene before, and now this mix is like 5% hygiene and a lot of emergency type stuff for 2 months. Are you still okay to lend, or does that give you a different answer? Because I think, you know, you and I talked about this in the unofficial poll. I think there's a lot of people not going for the hygiene appointments for 2-3 months.
Well, we just had this, and what dentists have to think. So Ariel was on here. She's a professional flosser. You know, she's a hygienist. You cannot use yourself as an example. And you really taking a survey, you know, dentists, you can use you, Bob, you're a non-dentist.
Yep.
And I just got a message from a dental nachoer who said, I would like to share this. She is the daughter of a dentist. I mean, she's a dentist. Her mom goes for her hygiene appointments every 6 months, 70 years old, and said, I'm not going to go for mine when it reopens. I'm going to take a break. And I see this for dentists, you know, I see this happening with a lot of things. We've made this joke about hair. Maybe that will be the one thing people do, but maybe not. You know, I think there's going to be a lot of caution. So we just need to be prepared for that. And the other thing, Bob, is me on the inside, and I was just listening to a Mark Casas webinar. We're not even sure how to manage hygiene, even if we could open the practice, right? Because there's aerosols created by hygiene. That's going to be a bigger deal than some of our emergency care. So I think the first thing, what you made a good point is we have to see what's going to happen to the hygiene department in our practices.
Well, and the waiting rooms. So, you know, you look at, you know, you're a former restaurant person.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're talking that it's not going to be a full restaurant. It's like be every third table or whatever. Well, same thing with dental practice. They're not going to want 12 people sitting in the waiting room. Well, how is that going to work? People were in the parking lot, people were in their cars. And what if it's a professional building? You know, are people lined up outside all waiting to get into their doctor or dentist appointment at this 3-story professional building? You know, how's that going to work? How's that going to impact your business?
And I mean, I think that's an important point for us to realize as owners and associates, you know, and I make these signs, what's our capacity post-COVID-19? Right. What's our capacity? And right now, what I'm thinking of, and we've talked, and people on this here, let's ask the webinar question, drop this in the chat. Let's just talk about the remainder of 2020. People are talking about 2021, 2022. I'm really into talking about the remainder of 2020, getting functional. What percentage of your hygiene department do you think you'll be able to fulfill between now and the end of the year? Put in the chat, 100%, 75%, 50%, 25%, 0%. What kind of hygiene capacity will you have post-COVID for the remainder of 2020? What's your best guess?
Well, and that's part of it. Now, the other part is there's a lot of people that aren't going to have any money, right?
Right.
So, procedures like implants and other things that are more elective type of thing that some practices were doing before, that's got to fall off, because people, they got to make a decision what to do with their money. Are they buying food and necessities, or are they going to get that implant that they've been wanting to get for a while, that they've, been in discussion with their dentist, for
and
a number of
I
months.
break that down into two parts. Is that the fear, which could be responsible concern. So people say, don't be fearful, but responsible concern. Don't walk on Broad Street at 1 a.m. in the morning asking people for directions. That's not fear. That's responsible concern. It's going to be safety and money. So I make these say, it's fear, response, it's safety and money.
Right.
And I know my dentist people, for people who give people bad news all the time, your tooth's broke and extracted, they do not like hearing what they think of as bad news. But I just think this falls under realistic news, realism, so you can prepare. Much like we've talked about sports injuries. If they say you've torn your ACL and you say to the doctor, am I going to play in the next 3 weeks? The doctor will say, no, you are not going to play in the next 3 weeks. This is what your rehab looks like. So I think we're in a dentistry rehab. Let's see, we got 25% tops, 50%, 50%, 65%. And the hygienists are fearful. So what I'd like to share with our audience, Bob, because we can break down a little bit about what you do. So what I do when I sell practices, I meet the seller, I gather a lot of information, I bring it to Bob, he does his valuation, we talk, I call it the Bob Magic. How does the hygiene revenue impact valuations when you're putting things into your Bob Magic system?
Well, each practice is different, and each has a different percentage, and that mix is more or less appealing for a buyer, right? So for a buyer, the mix he likes to see is a lot of hygiene and not a lot of other stuff being done, everything being referred out, right? That's positive for them, because they say, hey, I do my own endo.
And also that's what I call when I'm doing buyer coaching, which is something I do and I love doing. I'm not a dual representation broker. I don't do the same side on each deal, either sell the practice or buyer coaching. I say, can you replicate what the seller's doing? And hygiene is one of the easiest things to replicate: exams, hygiene, and fillings. So if I had a practice, Dr. Nacho's House of Dentistry, great name for a practice, Bob. This will be our logo, some nachos.
Okay.
And I was doing $300,000 in hygiene, $700,000 in dentisting production. My profit was 320 grand a year. Pre-COVID, if you were on a game show, what type of value would that practice have?
Well, as you and I have talked years on this subject, is that everyone likes to think we can just take like a certain percentage of collections to come up with a value. And it really is not that simple. Before or after, right? It's even more complicated now. But when we're looking in order of importance, the bigger piece is, what's the bottom line? Now you're telling me it's like 30-some%.
Yeah.
Not quite what we would like, right? Now let's put another example on of a practice that's doing 10% hygiene and 90% stuff, right? Yeah. Well, for a buyer, most buyers don't want that, because now they got to do all the work, right, to achieve that value, that top line and the bottom line. So value is what a buyer is going to pay. Supply and demand. So if there's less demand for that type of practice, the value goes down, right? Yeah. Another thing that's going on post-COVID is with the banks. So whereas they might have lent you 100% of the collections for that practice, I'm not saying that's the value, but that's what they would have lent you. Well, now they're saying they might lend you 80% of what that practice is doing. Yeah. Again, not saying that's the value, but if we've attached a value that we think we can sell it for, and the bank says, we're not lending you what you thought that practice was worth, well, is that telling you the practice's value is different, or we're just in a different time zone right now that we've got to wait out? I think to try and get that price.
Right. I think what's going to happen, a couple of things I could share is, first, Bob has a great CE course called The Tale of the $1 Million Practice That Made No Profit. Real story, right, Bob?
Absolutely.
So you can get that CE course. Ariel put it in the chat. It will walk you through how a dentist who is a good dentist was collecting $1 million but was not making a profit. You get that for free for watching in with us here on Zoom. It's a great piece of content to watch with your spouse, watch with yourself. And now we're applying this to the post-COVID world. What I think, Bob, when I say example, I do 700 in dentistry, 300 in hygiene. Now, let's just say the hygiene's gone. That's now 700. So now I have 500. So let's just say I maintain the same profit.
But what if you had 700, but for a couple months you have all this backed up demand? And that's kind of what I was getting at with the bank looking at it. Even if your numbers, top line numbers were similar, they got to look at the mix, because if the mix is different, right, it might be masking what's really going on and what's going to be going on in the future after that, right? Or at least in the short term.
So if we say a practice, I know you don't like when I use the example, but if it's worth 2 times its profit, I'm just trying to do some basic fundamental things.
We'll
I make 320. Now it's 640.
Okay.
Now I have 500. My profit is 200. My 640 practice now goes down to 400. So I think what's going to happen with the banks is not going to be very complicated at all. They're just going to loan on what the projection is of this practice. But unfortunately, if you're a seller right now, you may need to rehab the practice or take a lower amount. Either one could be fine. I mean, there's sellers out there, Bob, that have millions of dollars saved, and whether they get 700,000 for their practice or 400, it's not changing their life. But there's also ones that they can't retire from that. So it's customized decision making. So if you're a seller, doesn't mean you can't sell your practice. There might be some unique opportunities to get out of dentistry if you're ready to be done, but you might have to do that at a price just like a stock that was less. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also a misnomer that, well, hey, my practice did this the past 3 years, so my value should be X. Well, the value is not based on historical value. Value is based on what's the next year going to mean to me, the buyer.
Right.
That's what the value of this practice is. What's not what you did 3 years ago, but what it's going to be for me, the buyer, next year and after that. What's my cash flow going to be?
Yeah, they're buying.
Cash flow was.
And here's the thing. These are once decisions. They're once decisions for the seller. They're once decisions for the buyer. Build a team to figure out when you want to make those once decisions without doing it in a reactionary way. You might have thought you were selling your practice this year, and maybe that gets extended 2 more years. Or you might have not thought you were selling for 2 years, but we have to be aware. I mean, some things, Bob, some fun stuff coming down the pike for dentists here. Don't be jealous. You're not a dentist. We don't know what we have to do to our offices, infection control wise, when we reopen. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's some sort of air purifiers. But we do know this. You are an accountant, Bob, and you talk about the P&L, right? So you see a line for supplies. What is that normal percentage of a practice, supplies?
So 16% what we're looking for between supply and lab. So let's say 8%. Let's say 7 to 8%. Now, what you're saying is now not only might our revenue be down, our collections be down, but our costs might be up going forward based on the new environment that we're in for a dental practice.
Right. So watch this, dental office. So I'm here to JBR, just be real. JBR, just real. I'm a dental practice owner, 2 practices. We have personal protective equipment that we purchase for our practices. Right now, it looks like we're going to have to purchase more at a higher cost. So per patient visit is going to go up. So that is going to impact our profit. If I have to spend, if for any reason I had to hand a patient a $10 bill every time they came for a visit, and I see 5,000 patient visits a year, that's $50,000 of profit loss. So I want to ask people in the web chat here, because you guys did great, what do you think is going to happen to our infection control? Are we going to be the same when we reopen? Are we going to all have to wear face shields? Do you think something else? Share with us in a minute while I go over this point with Bob, because what we're talking about, Bob, is making people aware of the reality, because we deal with practice transitions daily. So what is a person buying when they buy a dental practice? They're buying goodwill. Goodwill is about people and relationships. And I always say dental offices are people places, not pizza places. So what I want to share, and one of my favorite movies, Fight Club. You ever see Fight Club, the movie?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, or Primal Fear. I don't want to ruin it for you because you're my friend. I've ruined it for other people. If I had to sell my own dental practice after this, I had to sell my own dental practice. I'm doing both sides. I'm the dentist and I'm selling it. I have no idea what type of patient confidence there's going to be when we go back. So if I said, I'm going to sell it to Bob Guac, I don't know if the patients are going to stay with Bob Guac. Maybe they need me to make them feel like it's okay. Use example with Ariel. People, if they walked in, and your wife does this, if they walk into their hairdresser and Gina's not there and Katie's there, they walk out sometimes.
Right.
So imagine in a dental office, post-coronavirus crisis, sellers and dentists, you may need to, not necessarily all from a productivity standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, from a patient confidence, your face will be, it's okay. This is what we need to do. So I see that as extending some of this timeline for sellers. What do you think?
Well, you're right. So I always like to use the example of that. I'm not a dentist, I'm a patient. And if my dentist sells their practice, I'm going to go because I'm a creature of habit, number one. Right. I know the front desk, I know the hygienist, it's just where I go. So unless a new dentist rubs me the wrong way, I'm going to try the new dentist. But like you're saying now, in today's environment and what's going on, that's a little bit more of a wrinkle into, what us patients are going to be experiencing. I don't know how that's going to make us look at it if it happens to us now, this year, next year.
So I think that dentists are not good at this. I think I am as a dentist, but they're not very mentally flexible. They're not a mentally flexible group. I don't think we were taught that in our training. So unfortunately, I think that now they're going to need to rely on that mental flexibility and totally JFO, just find out what happens when we reopen. So Ariel, if you're still there, ask us some of those some good polls on dental nachos today that we can talk about, and we'll have a game with our group here. Anyone has questions, just drop them in the chat. Just to go over, I see here's for the PP, Bob. Face shields and gowns at a minimum. Do you guys know that right now my brother, Jeff Nacho, who does all the supplies, he says gowns are $10 each. I don't know if they're that for everybody, but something that used to be $1 is now possibly 10 times the cost, Bob. So the cost of this is getting higher. I'm not saying he's not an authority on it. He was just looking into getting more gowns for us. Good points, guys. That was me. I said that. We're going to need level 3 masks, face shields, gowns, and gloves.
And don't you need to be doing some type of testing? Isn't that going to cost you something for?
That's a whole separate bag of nachos that we have so much to dig into that. Privacy issues, cost issues. How often do we do it?
Well, that's what I was thinking that more as a patient, right? So if I come in and you say, oh yeah, everybody has tested and they're okay. Well, when was that?
Right.
So yeah, maybe that one hygienist was tested a month ago. Well, how do I know that she's safe today?
I just think when I've been using this example, I just think
or the people in the waiting room.
We need a transitional time from closed to less closed where dentists don't rush back and try to do everything because I'm worried they're going to hurt themselves, not necessarily physically, but also practice reputation-wise. You just don't know yet, and I just think there's too many balls in the air to rush back with full capacity when they haven't given us the guidance. Here's an example. You play golf, right, Bob?
Yep.
I feel like we're getting ready to go back to play golf, but we don't have enough golf balls. We don't know if it's going to rain. Don't bring your poncho. You get out on the fourth hole and you only have 2 golf balls and you lost them both. What do you do at that point? Somebody said here, I'm an associate planning to partner at 50% beginning 2021 with a 5-year buyout without a bank. Without knowing the future of dentistry, should I still be moving forward with the valuation number completed earlier this year? What do you say there, Bob?
Wow. Anybody that's looking to buy a practice, whether it's a buy-in or straight out buy, you really have to see what is going to happen with that practice. So if it's me and I'm a buyer in any type of capacity, I want to see some history, just like the banks want to see some history, going forward for some period of time. And I can't tell you what period of time that is until I see it. But for sure, I want to see maybe 2-3 months of.
I'll share with that person that if I had an associate buying into my practice and we had $1 million cost, I would say we need to rework it. I'm a caring person. I'm going to say, let's see what happens. I don't want my partner, this is your partner, to be put in a financially problematic situation. So I think that goes on pause, and you have tough conversations. And we have resources at United Dental Brokers of America that consult with our company, and you're going to need a new appraisal maybe after 6 months and see what kind of trajectory you're on. Because first of all, even if you're not using a bank, you still don't, if the practice was doing $2 million and you thought you're going to take over half of the production, now the practice is doing $1.2 million, what are you going to make after buyout? So that's a very, very good question that you want to get a good team of advisors and have tough conversations and say, this is what makes sense at this time. And here's the thing. I know my dentist people, you got a seller, they think they're selling their practice for 800 and they don't want to hear anything else. Just say, if you were in my shoes, would you buy it for this amount of money?
Well, and let's just look in the short term compared to long term. So I think you and I are thinking, hey, long term, whatever long term is, things will be pretty much okay, right?
Right.
But what is that time frame? So let's say for a year and a half, we're operating at 80% of capacity, right, of what we used to do, right? How's that changing the value? How do we know that it really is going to go up to 100 and not 90%, right? And so maybe it goes 80%, gets to 90, and then just stops, right, and levels off from there.
Yeah. I mean, we had Alistair McDonald on our podcast. Ariel can share. So this is all JBR time, guys. You're here. You're getting free prizes. You're enjoying Bob and I. We're sharing stories and information. There's no studies on this yet because we're living in the middle of the M. Night Shyamalan movie right now. But Alistair McDonald had all these – he's a financial guy. This has nothing to do with dental practices, but how long does it take certain businesses to get back to their pre-recession numbers? Some took 22 years in his studies. Some took 8 years. So if you're in the buying phase, you just have to go in with eyes wide open so you just don't get yourself in a situation that you can't get out of. And this is where you need to rely on advisors. Our Dental Amigos podcast is an amazing resource, guys. It's free. You got a lot of time. Listen to the episodes so that you can listen to these people who do this every day, dental-focused accountants, and people like Bob who can help you. Ariel, ask us our next poll.
Yes. So the question is, whether you produce 10K a month or 100K a month, how long do you think it will take most practices to get back to pre-COVID conditions?
So there we go for our group. So whether you produce 10,000 a month or 100,000 a month, drop this in the chat. How long will it take to get back to your pre-COVID numbers? Here's your choices. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, or 2+ years. 3 months, 6 months. We got 3 to 4 months for some people, 2+ years, 1 year, 6 months. So I like some of this.
What's most everybody saying?
What was the top winning one in that one, Ariel?
The top winning one was 1 year with 96 votes.
1 year was the top there.
And then 6 months was after that.
Yeah. So not a lot of people think things are going to be hunky-dory in 3 months.
I mean, here's the thing. What I actually think is, I'm going to share this with my dental people because I'm a practice owner. I'm going to have an easier time dealing with the fear of safety than the fear of money. We're going to figure out the fear of safety. It's going to happen. Just like HIV/AIDS back in the day, we're going to figure this out faster than people who might have lost their jobs or had their retirement portfolio go down.
I'm going to use you as an example, Paul, because you're very visual and well, that too.
Yeah,
right?
thanks.
But as a practice owner, you're out there, right?
Yeah.
So you could convey to me, the patient, what all you've done to make your practice the safest practice in all the Philly land.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to feel better about going to Dr. Paul Goodman, my dentist, because he's outlined all these things. Right. But what if I go to the small practice, a couple ops, doing $300,000-$400,000 a year, and they don't have this stage that you have? It's harder for them to let, Bob Septak, the patient, know that, hey, we've got this under control from a safety, situation. Come on back, come get your cleaning, whatever you need to be done. But I think that's something that the dentists need to convey to us, the patients, what all they've done to protect us so that we feel better about going for that hygiene appointment in June rather than just saying, hey, I'm going to wait till my January one.
It's such a good point, Bob, and it brings up this for me: unique transition toppings, mergers. So what I want to share is I've been watching The Last Dance by Michael Jordan, and it reminded me that I want to be a professional basketball player, but I only grew to this body. That was it. Okay. So since I'm not going to be a professional basketball player, I'm here with dentistry. I'm 42. My brother's 37. So I've done this 3 times already. If someone down the street from me said, I have a this might help someone on the webinar or watching this. I have a $300,000 practice. I don't know if I want to do this freaking the PPE, all this stuff. How about I merge with you? What does that look like? Now, I'm a practice owner, and I'll say, hey, come work with us for a year. I'll pay you per patient, and maybe that's how they get out of dentistry. There's going to be, if you're a buyer, who here is on the, a potential buyer? Raise your hand if you're a potential buyer over the next 3 or 4 years out there, on the chat, if you figure out to raise your hand. Be open to unique opportunities that will arise out there.
While you're waiting for that answer on that,
yeah,
I'll share a little story. I got a call yesterday from a practice owner who has 2 locations, and the overhead is such, having 2 locations, that the bottom line is nowhere close to where it needs to be based on the collections and the overhead having 2 offices. So this seller is thinking about selling one of the locations because they want to retire in 3 years and sell the practice. And it's an excellent opportunity for them, because if we can do something with that one office and they get out from under that, then they can focus on the one location,
right?
Get those collections up to be where they should be in relation to that rent, and then have a practice that they can sell at a reasonable price, rather than having a practice with the same amount of collections, but who's going to go buy it because the profit's not there?
Right.
And part of what's driving this is the COVID stuff. Just like you're saying, they're saying, hey, I don't know, this is hard enough with one location. I don't want to have to deal with this with 2 locations, right?
Yeah. And that's why you might be able to take a problem off of somebody's hands, and it might fit. Remember, these are one-on-one things. You only need one person to solve your problem, but to solve your problem, connect with every broker in your area. Start to build your team on either side of these things. Don't get into analysis paralysis. Get into momentum. What are small things you can do? Just like Bob's webinar we're giving out, the Tale of the $1 Million Practice Made No Money, dentalnachos.com. If you're watching this, you could use the code 25Zoom and get a free 1-hour course. Ariel, share with us the next poll.
Yeah, the next poll was, you are about to buy a practice for $1 million. Practice collects 1.5. The coronavirus has grounded dentistry. Dentistry reopens, and the seller wants to know if you are ready to purchase. What do you do?
Okay, so what are the choices there?
The choices are: have the seller work for 3 months and renegotiate, put it off a year, have the seller work 6 months and renegotiate, ask my advisors, I don't know, what should I do, back out of the deal, too risky.
All right, so everyone, we're giving out these awesome free prizes for you. So what would you guys do? You're about to buy a practice for $1 million. Coronavirus ends. Seller says, what do you want to buy it for now? What are you going to do? 3 months to renegotiate, buy it for the same price, ask your advisors, put it off for a year. Yeah, so people are saying put it off for a year, which makes sense, because if you're the seller, that may help you get the same price back again.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, you go ahead, Bob. That's good.
I was going to say one other thing, that adds into this for the buyers is that the banks look at the buyer and their financial capability and how strong they are, right? So now you have some dentists that haven't been working for 3-4 months, right? So they've drawn down their assets, right?
For sure.
So now, if the bank goes to look at them, they don't have the assets that the bank likes to see, savings, whatever. They're not a good candidate anymore as they were January, February. They might not be able to buy a practice that they thought right now anyway.
And that goes back to connecting with I want to bring up the bank again, connect with the bank. because some deals may be strong enough to close, some may not be, some may be in the middle. So remind me, Bob, what are the banks telling you so far?
So that was one of the conversations that we had. So one, we talked about where they might have lent 100% of, the collections on a practice. Now that maybe they're going to do maybe 80. But the second part of it was the buyers, because they're looking at a strength of a buyer. And, even though that's not the number one focus, it's a part of the focus. And if that buyer has drained his savings over this period of time, he might not be looked at as a good candidate anymore. And he might have to build up that savings account for a year or two before he fits the criteria that the bank's looking for.
And we had some good comments on the chat about we can, possibly use holdbacks and earnouts. Those are just unusual for private deals. They're more normal for DSO deals. But holdbacks or earnouts are definitely things people can use.
And maybe there's some more seller financing now than the banks, because they might need to.
And it's all about creative problem solving. If you're a seller out there, or your seller wants to move to Arizona, they still probably want to move, and maybe they're willing to take less. Maybe they're willing to have you pay them overtime. Just always ask. It cannot hurt to ask and have those tough conversations. Question here. Hey, Paul, I'm finishing up my residency program and I have a practice lined up that I originally planned to purchase. Does it make more sense to be an owner and control my own destiny despite the uncertainty, or find an associateship when people may not be looking for one? I would likely lose the chance to buy this practice in the area my wife and I want to live. My income from residency ends June 30th, so I need to choose one way or the other. What are your thoughts, Bob?
Wow. I don't want to say bad timing.
Yeah,
right? But hey, I think you and I in the same boat. We like having our own business, right? And if you can do that, I mean, that's always the best answer. And if you could find the right practice that's a fit for you.
In that scenario, if someone like to say, how long is the owner going to stay on with you? That's a big point. How long was the owner going to stay on with you? The owner's going to stay on for a period of time. That may be a help for confidence, because we didn't talk about one group that I think is going to be I have them a challenge to figure out is the team, the employees. What is the conversation going to be? How many come back? How many don't come back? What type of PPE do they need? So if they are going to have a brand new mom or dad of the practice, it could be a very disruptive thing to change the mom or dad, new mom or dad, team issues. That's something I'm worried about.
So now that you bring that up, I've talked to dentists where they've talked to their hygienists, and some of the people aren't coming back. They're older, they don't need to work anymore. They might want to go in a, different type of environment. So let's say there's a number, 5%, pick any number, a percentage that employees don't want to come back. Well, what's going to happen? Supply and demand, the price for those employees, everybody's scrambling to get good employees. It's hard enough now as it is, right? So imagine the price goes up, and now you were talking about the cost of goods going up, and now what about your labor costs go up as well, because you have to overpay for some of your employees, but just to keep them on so they don't go somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. It's the team part, and that person who's asking, you really have to dig into the Nacho plate of the transition. How long is the dentist staying? What's happening with the team, and what's happening with the price? In that scenario, I've called the bank your mom, because nothing happens without your mom as a kid saying your plan works. You can go skiing. You can go to a great adventure. So the bank is going to be the one in control there. And I think it's very reasonable. I'm a big next step person to say to an owner, hey, let's delay this for a quarter, 3 months. Let's see what happens over 3 months. And if things look good, let's continue, because that's giving you a cushion. A couple other questions before we wrap up, Bob. Do you think there'll be a ton of practices with poor cash flow that just close permanently?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that.
I think so.
So those are great chart purchase opportunities. So maybe you're a dentist that has 2,000 charts and you want to sell your charts. Bob and I can help with that. United Dental Brokers of America, Bob at udba.biz. You can put that in there, Ariel, Paul at udba.biz. There's chart purchases, mergers, interesting transition things. Always be exploring ABE. So that's a good point. What happens to the 401k? Will more dentists retire sooner? Should the future practice owners aim at contacting dentists in their mid-50s? I'm a big fan of contacting dentists for conversations to know more about them, but I think, unfortunately, the 401ks may be on the decline.
Well, and we didn't even talk about that aspect of it, but, you know, numbers are down, let's say 30% in their 401ks if all their money was tied up like that. And this happened back in 2008. Dennis said they were looking to sell at that point in time, and they said, I can't sell now. You know, I've got to replenish that. I need to put this on hold for a couple of years. And so there's going to be dentists from that perspective that say, I need to keep working for a while. I can't sell right now.
And that's why it's just always key to find out the person's life situation, what fits into it. What fits into one seller's won't fit into the other. Don't be discouraged buyers. You have to just contact as many people as possible, but don't make a decision on feelings. Your goal is to hire someone who's not part of your life, someone who's not emotionally invested in your life, and say, does this make sense? Maybe you're working on a deal for 2 years to buy in with your childhood dentist. Well, it's different now. So it has to make sense for you. You don't want to make a reactionary decision that doesn't make sense. While we're talking, Bob, look at this. I am like a Nacho Bob Ross. I made a little sign here. You want Bob's course, on-demand CE, use the code 25Zoom on dentalnachos.com, and you can get the tale of the $1 million practice that made no profit. So we're going to wrap up here in a second because I got to go hunting for nachos, Bob. But look what Mrs. Nacho made me here to wear out and about.
Wow.
I got my own nacho mask, Ariel. You can make one for yourself.
Right.
Any last-minute questions from our group? We went over a lot of stuff here. I appreciate you guys being on. I see some of my friends and all this in the chat. Thanks for hanging with us on this Friday. Ariel at dentalnachos.com is a great resource that helps with our buyer coaching, learning more about what we do, having conversations, running something by someone, whether it's Bob or me, and say, does this make sense? That's what people do in this space. I mean, this is nothing to do with COVID. You got people call you up all the time and say, does this make sense? And probably a lot of times you might say no.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, I try and look at it like I'm their uncle or something like that. I'm going to give you my honest opinion.
Right.
You might not like it, right? Or may not be what you were looking for, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're there to do. Kindly annoy you into good decisions, help you make, because we know when stuff doesn't go right with your once decision, you look back and you regret a bad decision. You get a bad haircut whenever that's legal again, fine, that grows back. You buy even a bad car, these are things that are hard to come back from. Well, thanks for being on with us, Bob. I'm going to get ready for tonight to have my
we have two questions.
2 questions. Sure.
Yeah. Someone asked, how about starting a practice this year?
Starting a practice is usually an 18-month journey. Jamie Amos, one of our key resources and sponsors from Ideal Practices, does a lot in this space. To me, startups are a high wire act that have to be done well. Interestingly, I think some of it can make sense because it might not start for 18 months past all this time. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I'm not in that space as much as you know. And there are certain people that, like you're saying, Jamie, that's their expertise. And that's, somebody's thinking about that. That's the type of person I would approach to see if it makes sense in this environment or not. I don't think that's in my expertise to say whether it makes sense.
Yeah, that's a JFO, but I would look to some of these consultants that do it and find out what the practice is, because it's a high wire act to do a startup. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea, but you just have to be open to not having a lot of revenue when you start. But that may apply to a lot of different practices now, so it could make sense for you if you're not going to open for 12 months. What was the other question, Ariel?
The other question was, how do you find someone to merge?
Great question. Write letters, call people in the area. Don't be weird about it. So don't be like, hey, this is Dr. Paul Goodman. Hey, Dr. Bob Septak, would you sell me all your patients? That's not going to work. Hi, my name's Dr. Paul Goodman. I love this area and would like to learn more about it. Or I'm a dentist in the area. Would we be able to get together for lunch whenever that's illegal? But that's legal. Or maybe a Zoom call and say, I'd like to find out more about what goes on with you. Just be normal. JBN also stands for just be normal, not your strengths, dentist. So talking to each other, not your strengths. The dental student Hunger Games ruined us. But just say, hey, I'd like to go to lunch. I'd like to check in with you. Then you ask questions and you hear and say, how about this? I have a larger practice. Would you be open to having a discussion about merging? And you won't know until you ask. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent thing to do. And also, you want to have an accountant look at those numbers, because we talk about the mergers. You eliminate all those duplicate expenses, right? So,
Yeah.
Your bottom line, you're going to make more with that practice that you're acquiring than he or she was making with that practice, due to those items reducing the duplicate expenses. So, make sure you have somebody that can crunch those numbers for you and then help you evaluate that.
Yeah, so just walk it down the road. Next step, talk to them, find out what it is. Do not be dentist cheap on advisors. If your life is a pizza, I love pizza too. Yes, maybe you take out your expenses of some, your gym's out, things like that. But if you're a dentist, good advisors, attorneys, accountants, people that you pay to get good advice on your wants decisions, it's still time to spend money on this, because it's too big a decision to try to figure it out on your own. It's not the type of stuff you want to DIY. There's legal implications to doing these things. So definitely do preliminary work on your own. But then when it comes time to making a decision, get involved with the right people. Any other questions, Ariel?
We have two more. What do you think about dental startup? We kind of already talked about that. And what about buying in as a partner?
Buying in as a partner, we had a good question is, it's really a reassessment of the practice value, the practice volume, very key, and it's going to be disheartening. I understand. Just say to people, I would be disappointed too. If I was a seller thinking someone's going to buy in my $1 million practice and now it's 700, I'd be disappointed too, but let's figure out what plan makes sense, and you need to reevaluate that practice price like we talked about there.
No more questions.
Cool. I want to remind everybody, this weekend I have up here, text BOND to 55444, and you'll get a watch and pass. Tomorrow we have a 4-hour course of amazing clinical toppings: prosthodontist, high-level general dentist, lab technician, the stuff you love, full mouth rehabs. Watch in for free and enjoy. And then on Sunday, myself and Dr. Mark Costas are going to talk about the circle of dentisting life, from baby age dentist to retired age dentist, what you can do. It's all free. It's fun. This is the time, guys, we could tell your family that you have your own homework, so you have to be on Zoom, no one bother you, and just get out your parenting medicine and a straw and enjoy the weekend, right? Just sneak a few little bottles of tequila in with you. Thanks, Bob, for being on with us. How can people reach out to you if they want to contact you about any of this?
Great, thank you.
Just share with us your best contact info.
Bob at udba.biz, B-I-Z.
Perfect, Bob at udba.biz. Well, Bob comes to Philly, so it's illegal again. You can come meet him in person.
I should have been there today.
Yes, I know. Today was the day, so it's disheartening. Awesome, guys. Glad you guys really enjoyed it. Really great meeting you guys. We're all in this together with our own unique journey. I'm going to jump off. I'll leave the chat up for a few minutes with Ariel. And Bob, enjoy the rest of your day out there in Pittsburgh.
Thank you too, Paul. Take care. Thanks.